Join me as we learn Chumash for Shabbos, the seventh Torah reading of Parshas Beha'aloscha, chapter 11, verse 30. Yesterday's Torah reading, we read about the complaints that the Jewish people had against Moshe and God for the very fact that they wanted a change in the menu. They were asking for meat and some other complaints, and the very fact that Moshe complained to God, saying that it's too much for him to tolerate and too much for him to handle of the many different complaints. Is he responsible to take care of all their different difficult needs? And therefore God tells him that he's going to give him 70 elders who are going to assist him in prophecy, as well as that the Jewish people are going to get their request of meat. This week's Torah reading continues to tell us about that episode as the Jewish people eat their meat and the punishment that comes with it, as well as the repercussions of the prophecy that Eldad and Medad, who are now told, as yesterday we spoke about, that the Gershom came to say about the prophecy that Eldad and Medad were saying. Chapter 11, verse 30. Vayosef Moshe lamachna hu v'ziknei Yisrael. And Moshe gathered together with the elders of Israel, withdrew from the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they went to the camp, each person to his private tent. Vayosef Moshe, meaning, what does it mean? He gathered. So therefore Rashi explains, Mi Pesach Oil Moed, they left from the entrance of the tent of meeting, and each which was in the Levite, and they went to their tent, to their respective places, where Moshe went to the tent, to the Levite camp. El Hamachana, to the camp, meaning that the elders, not only did Moshe go back to his place, but also the elders, Nichnasu Ishla Ale, they all went to their tents. Now Rashi goes back to the word Vayosef, because the word Vayosef generally means to gather. As we find that the people of Levi gathered to him, so over here, the Vayosef meaning seems like they departed, they gathered into their home, and that's what Rashi explains here. Vayosef, Loshin Knisa Labayis, meaning that they went into their home. We find this also as well in the book of Deuteronomy when it tells about when you find a lost item. You will gather it into your home until your brother comes to ask you for it. When we find it in one place, we use it as a source for all other places as well. And thereby, there's also other places where we find, for example, in Tehillim, a person gathers all time of harvest, but he doesn't know who is going to be the one to actually bring it into the home. Malamed, it teaches us over here, why does the Torah have to tell us that they all went into their homes? That being that we're soon going to learn about the punishment that was given to the evil people that were complaining, that God waited for each one of these holy and righteous people to enter their home until he brought upon the punishment on the others. Verse 31. And a wind went from God. This is the following morning, being that was the 20th of Iyar. We're now talking about the 21st of Iyar, when God told them that they're going to get meat. What happened that the meat came? A wind went forth from God. Vayoga salvim min hayam, and it swept up quail from the sea. Vayitei shalamachana, and it spread it all over the camp. Kederech yem koy, kederech yem koy. It was about a day's journey this way and about a day's journey that way. Uka'amasa esvives hamachana, and it was all around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the ground, meaning that they came very low, so this way the people were able to catch them. Let's see Rashi. Vayogas, what does the word vayogas mean? Vayafriach, that he made the wind blow. The chain we find similar in Tehillim, that the person's life goes fleeting by. The chain goes over, so to Nachum, where it talks about the prophecy as well. Vayitosh, the word vayitosh means, in this case, vayitosh alamachda, and it spread over the camp. So Rashi tells us this comes from the word vayivshet, that it spread over. As it says in the book of Samuel, that they were spread out over the land. That I spread you out in the desert. It was about 2 cubits above the ground. It was flying the height which is right by the heart or chest of the human being. God made it that they shouldn't have to bother, shouldn't have to strain themselves not to bend down to pick it up or not to climb high to try to get them. Verse 32, and the people got up the people arose and gathered that day, v'chol halayla, and all that night, v'chol yom ha'mochres, and all the following day, v'yasvu es haslav, and they gathered the quail. Hamamit, the person who gathered the minimal amount, the least, osaf asara chamorim, gathered 10 chomer, which is about 85 cubic feet. And then once they slaughtered them, they spread them out in layers around the camp. Rashi, Hamamit. What does it mean, Hamamit? Misha osaf pachas mekulam, the guy that collected the least out of all of them. For example, atzelim v'chigrim, the lazy people or the people who are limping that are not able to walk well. Osaf asara chamorim collected 10 piles. 10 piles, as we mentioned, it was about 85 cubic feet. Vayishtechu, what is it? Because they got so much and they were worried that it might get ruined and smell. So therefore, also mashtichin, they made them into big piles in its width. So this way, the sun should come on them and should dry them out quickly. And this way, it should not become spoiled. Verse 33, Habasar eidenu b'sheneim, the meat was still between their teeth. Terem yikares, before they even finished biting it. Va'af Hashem chara ba'om, and the anger of Hashem, and God became angry at them. Va'yach Hashem ba'om ma'korab b'miyod, and God gave them a mighty blow in killing many people. 33, Terem yikares, kitargumai, like the Targum says, Adloi Posak, they still didn't even finish chewing the meat. Davracher, another explanation, he didn't even have a chance to bite into it with his teeth until he was already killed. And they called the name of that place, Kivrei Sataiva, the graves of the craving, because there they were buried the people who were craving. 35, Mikivra Sataiva, from the place called Kivra Sataiva, which is now the next day. They continue then to travel. Nasu Am Chatzeres, they traveled to Chatzeres, Vayiyu B'Chatzeres, and they stayed in Chatzeres for a full week, as we will now recount in the next chapter. Chapter 12, verse 1. V'tedaber Miriam v'Aaron b'Moshe alodas ha'isha kushis asher lokach. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe regarding the Cushite woman that Moshe took. Ki isha kushis lokach, because he married a Cushite woman. What is Cushite? What are we referring to? As Rashi is going to explain. Just a little preface. If you recall, we mentioned previously that Gershom came and told Moshe that Eldad and Medad are prophesying that Yeshua is going to die, and that Moshe is going to die, and Yeshua is going to be his successor. This has to do with what Miriam was talking about. Let's see Rashi. Vatedaber, and she spoke. Why does it use the terminology vatedaber instead of atomer, as it also means to say? Ein diber b'chol mokim ela lashon kasha. Whenever we find a terminology of daber, means more harsh kind of words. We find us that Judah tells his father that Joseph spoke to them harshly. And when we find the word omer, vayomer, amira, that's more of a appeasement or mercy, more of a more subtle way of talking. As it says, the same portion over there in Genesis where he says, my brothers were actually from Lot, asking the people of Sodom, please don't harm the angels that came to visit. Or Vayemer Shimud Dvarai, or he says, please listen to my words. It's always in words of pleading, Loshim V'chol No, Loshim Bakasha. Every time it says the word No, which is a terminology of pleads. But the Daber Miriam Aaron, and Miriam and Aaron spoke. Why does it say Miriam before Aaron? Because he pascha petibor tchila, she's the one that began speaking. Therefore, the Torah says her name first. And how do we know? How did Miriam know that Moshe separated from his wife? Rabbi Nosson says Miriam what happened was, and this is the story, because we mentioned over here that Miriam spoke about the wife that Moshe had, his Cushite wife, that he's now separated from her. What was it, and how did Miriam know that Zipporah was separated from Moshe? And he says that Miriam was standing at the side of Zipporah, the wife of Moshe. When it was told by Gershom that Eldad and Medad were prophesying in the camp, Kiv and Sheshama Tzipora, when Tzipora heard these words, Amra, she said, Oilin Shisein Shal Elu, Imhem Niskakim Lenavua. Woe is to the wives of these individuals if they are going to prophesy. Because they're going to separate from their wives the same way my husband separated from me once he became a prophet. And from there Miriam found out about it, and she went to tell Aaron because of it. If Miriam, now Rashi goes on to say, if Miriam, who did not intend to gossip about Tzipporah or Moshe, but was looking for the benefit of both of them, and she was still punished, how much more so, to somebody who intends to gossip and slander his friend, how much more so the punishment is to them. What does it mean, the Kushit wife? It doesn't mean necessarily that she was coming. Generally, the word Kushit is translated as the word black. It wasn't saying that, talking about her specifically about her color, but actually what this is talking about, it's telling us over here, and the reason why we can't say that she was black anyways, because the people that were black were from the family of Cham. Those came from the land of Cush. She was the daughter of Yisro, who was from Midian, the Midianites, and who was from the children of Keturah, who were from the wife of Avram. So they came from Avram technically. But what is this telling us? It's telling us that everybody agreed how beautiful she was. The same way everybody will agree black is black, so too they all agree that everybody would say and that Tzipporah was beautiful. Kushis, the word Kushis, the letters Kushis, is gematria, is in the same numeric value as Yafas Mara, very beautiful looking, which is 736. Al-Oidas Aisha, Al-Oidas Gidusha, what does it mean about the woman? Meaning about the fact that Moshe divorced his wife. Why does the Torah have to repeat and say about the Cushite woman he took, and then it says that he took a Cushite woman? What is the Torah telling us that again? That he took a Cushite woman? You can have a woman who's beautiful in the way she looks, but she's not so beautiful in the way she behaves. And then you can have one you can have one that behaves beautifully, but she's not good looking. But Tzipporah, she was good looking, she was beautiful in her complexion and the way she looked, and she was beautiful in her action and in her deeds. Rashi then continues, meaning a person is called by who they are, meaning because she was beautiful, she was called Kushit, like a person who calls his son beautiful. That's a terminology, it's like a nickname that you would give the person. Now, why did she call him Kushi, black, if she was beautiful? This was using a different kind of term, like a nickname or an exaggeration or a slang to be able to avoid a bad eye. He married this Cushite woman, and she is so beautiful in the way she behaves and the way she looks. And what did he do now? He divorced her. And that's what they were discussing. When they said, this, they said, has Shem only spoken to Moshe? God also spoke to us. Vayishma Hashem, and God heard what they said. Rashi, harak ach, only with him did God speak. And just because God spoke to us, we didn't stop living with our spouses. The Torah now tells us that Moshe was the most humble of all people. Asher al pnei adama, that were on the face of the earth. Anav, what does the word anav mean? Shafal v'saflan. He was humble and tolerant. Meaning that he would say that if somebody else would have this position, they would do a better job. And he would also tolerate the people that poke things at him, as we're going to see later on in Korach and so on. And God said suddenly to Moshe, and to Miriam, to come out, all three of you, to the tent of meeting. And they all three went out. Pisam, what does the word pisam mean? Nigla aleim pisam. He revealed to them suddenly, without any preparation. V'heim tameim b'derech eretz. And they could have been impure because of their intimate relations. V'hayu tzayikim. And they were saying, Mayim, mayim, that we need water to immerse ourselves before we go talk to God. Why did God come specifically at this time? Because to let them know that this was the correct thing that Moshe did, that he separated from his wife. Seeing at this time that they would have to go quickly and immerse themselves in the mikveh, because they had to immerse themselves after the intimate relations that they were with their spouses. Therefore, God showing them, look, you know why Moshe had to separate himself? Because he also has to be always ready at any time for God to come and appear himself to him. There was no set time that God would come to him. Teaching us that all three of them were called at once. This is something which is impossible, that every person should hear a message at the exact same time, but nobody else heard it, the other one knew it. That was unique quality and miracle of this statement. Verse 5. And God descended in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And he called to Aaron and Miriam, and they both went out. He went alone, meaning without any escorts of angels. Not like the person of flesh and blood. A king of flesh and blood, when he goes out to war, goes out with a bunch of assistants and a whole escort to make sure that he's victorious and making sure to protect him. When he goes out for peace, he goes out with less of an entourage because he's not concerned. God, however, he goes out to war alone. As it says, God is a man of war. When he goes out for peaceful talks, he goes with angels. As it says, that God, when he reveals, he comes with thousands of angels. Vayikra Aaron and Miriam, he calls Aaron and Miriam. He called them that they should be removed from Moshe and be able to go towards where God was calling them. The two of them went. Why did God pull them away and separate them from Moshe? Because as we mentioned previously in the book of Genesis by Noach, the Torah mentions this as well, that when you talk about a person's praise, you only say partially of his praise before him and all of his praise behind, not in front of him. As we find by Noach, as the Torah says, it says, each tzaddik tamim, that he was righteous and sincere, but in front of him, God only calls him a tzaddik as a righteous person. Another reason why God separated them from Moshe, that Moshe should not hear how Aaron and Miriam are being reprimanded. Verse 6. And God said to them, please listen to my words. If there was ever a prophet amongst you, I Hashem make myself known to him in a vision. In a vision I will speak with him in a dream. Rashi, the word no here means please, God saying, listen to what I have to say and don't get so confused. If you're going to have prophets later on in generations, you should know Hashem b'madei love his father. I do not appear to them in a clear, spaklaria mi'irya literally means a magnifying glass, meaning a very clear lens that they're able to see what's going on, only through a vision and a dream. However, Moshe is different. Moshe is not the same, because with Moshe he is faithful throughout my household. Verse 8. Pel pe adaber boy. When I speak to him mouth to mouth. Meaning, umare v'lei bechidas, and is in a vision and without riddles, and ambiguously, without any riddles. Usmunas Hashem yabit, and behold the image of God he can see. Why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? Rashi, pel pe, amarti le'lifresh mina. This that you're talking about him, I don't speak to him through an angel. I told him clearly, I am the one that told him to separate from his wife. The Heichon Amartala, you may ask, where did God actually tell him? But Sinai, because it says by Mount Sinai, Leichem Arlam Shuv Lachem Aleichem, Va'ata Poy Amodi Modi. He tells everybody else, go and return back to your tents and go become back with your wives. However, God tells Moshe, you stand here with me. When we talk about Mara, vision, this talks about an unambiguously, meaning that you're able to see it in the words that he's saying. He understands and articulates, he knows what to say. I explain to my words by the very fact that it's so clear that there's no way that you can translate it other ways. And I don't block it with different riddles or parables. Like it says by Yecheskel, by Yecheskel the prophecy is told him as a riddle. I would think that maybe this is talking about the vision of the divine presence. It can't be referring to the divine presence because previously, when in the Torah reading of Mishpatim in the book of Exodus, where Moshe says, I want to see God's face, God says you can't see God's face. So what is he talking about a vision here? The vision here is that with the words that God tells him are so clear that they're unambiguous. What does it mean, the vision of God that he sees? This is the back, as we learned again in the book of Exodus, that he was able to see the back of God, but not the front. He doesn't say my servant Moshe, but it says my servant in Moshe. Meaning, ba'avdi, in my servant, even though he's not Moshe, in Moshe, even if he's not my servant. Meaning, the greatness that he has. This was a person who I chose him to be my servant, even though you may say he may not be as righteous, but I also chose him to be Moshe, that he should be mine. Even if he wasn't my servant, or even if he wasn't Moshe, but the very fact that I chose him, you should have been careful not to speak about him. And the very fact now that even more, how much more so that he is my servant, and that he is the king, the servant of the King of Kings. You should realize that the king loves him. The king doesn't love him for no reason. If you may say, well, I don't know why and so, and therefore I'm telling you, meaning that the very fact that you made yourselves God, that you are the one that eyes and ears to see what the person should do, and you could think that God doesn't see what's going on, that's even worse. Who are you to judge of why he's doing things? Verse 9. And God became angry with them and left. Once he let them know what they did wrong, he condemned them, and because of that, he left them and wasn't going to be in their presence. This is even more so when it comes to a person, when people are upset at one another. Don't just be upset at a person or get angry at somebody without telling them what they did wrong. Tell them what they did wrong, express why you're upset at them, and only then you can then decide how you want to act accordingly. Verse 10. The cloud then departed from above the tent, and Miriam was then afflicted with tsaras, that she became white like snow. And Aaron turned to Miriam, and he saw, behold, she was a tsaras. Rashi only after God's divine presence left, only then did she become afflicted by the tsaras. It's like a king who tells his educator, punish my son. Please don't punish him until I go away, because I don't want to see him being punished. And then I'll have mercy on him and he won't get punished. And Aaron says to Moshe, Bi Adoni, please my master, Al no sashe salenu, do not hold us accountable, Achatas asher ne'alnu, for our sin that we have acted foolishly, Vasher chatonu, and that we have sinned. Ne'alnu, what does the word ne'alnu mean? Rashi explains, Goloshin evil, like a person who's not that smart, meaning acting foolishly. Verse 12, Al nosi hi kameis, let her not remain like a dead person. Asher b'tzeise merechem imay, for since she has also come out of our mother's womb, she's related, she's our own flesh, she's our sister. Vayei ochel chatzi b'sorei, and half of our flesh is consumed. That leaving her in this state, that she is now, as a tzaras, if she is now afflicted, we're all afflicted because she's our flesh. As Rashi explains. Al nasihi, meaning achiseinu zu, our sister, kameis, like a person who's dead. And the reason is because a Metzora Choshev Kames, a Metzora is considered as if they're dead. Ma mes metame bebiyah, just like a person who's dead will then makes anything impure that it goes, anything that comes into its contact or even its tent will make it impure. So too Metzora metame bebiyah, so too a Metzora, anything that it comes in contact with, wherever it will be, will make it impure. That's why it has to go outside the camp, so it shouldn't make everything impure. Asher b'tzeisim erechemimei, meaning she is our sister that we were born from the same womb. He could have said, our mother. The Torah changed it and made it in a way that not to include Miriam in it. That says his flesh, not our flesh. He could have said that. The Torah avoided from saying it that way, so therefore it should not be able to all put them all in the same category. But that's what Aro meant to say, that being that she came out of her mother's womb, so therefore if she's suffering, it's as if we're all suffering. This is similar that it says before in the book of Genesis, that why should we pray for him? Because since he is brother and our flesh. Well, this also seems like how you can read from the simple interpretation of the verse. It's not appropriate that a brother should allow his sister to be like a dead person, which is a person with tzaras is considered as dead. Because this one came out of the same womb, meaning we are related, and this brother has the ability to help and heal her. And he doesn't help her. And this is as if your half of flesh is eaten, because this your brother is part of your flesh. And therefore, if a brother has the ability to help somebody else and help him get out of the predicament that they're in, that brother should make sure to pray for them and get them out of that predicament. So over here we see the two ways of looking at it: either pray for her because we're related and therefore you should help her, or talking about in general that the brothers coming out of a shared family have a shared responsibility to take care of one another. Davracher, another explanation, al nasihi kameis. She should not be like a dead person, meaning do not allow her to stay in the level of impurity. If you're not going to heal her with your prayer, mi mazgira o mi metara. Who is going to be the one to condemn her, and who's going to be the one to purify her? Meaning, it was mitzaras, as we learned in the book of Leviticus, the tzaras for 7 days has to go into quarantine, and after that they can be in that moment where they get purification from a kohen. Who's going to be the one to do it? Ani efshar lireisa. I'm not able to do it, he says, as a kohen. Shani kodev in kodev reis and I'm related to her, and according to Jewish law, because a relative has a biasness, he can't be the one to determine if his own relative has tzaras. Another Kohen in Ba'olam. There is no other Kohen that's not related to her, because the only Kohenim that existed was Aaron and his two sons, and they were all related to her. And therefore he says, because we are related, nobody's going to be able to heal her. So the only way she can get healed is if you pray for her. Verse 13. Moshe cried out to God, Lamer, saying, please God, heal her. The Torah over here is telling us the proper way a person should pray. That when somebody asks for something, he shouldn't quickly ask the first thing asked. When a person asks for something, it's not appropriate to go right away and ask. First say some nice things, and afterwards you say, you ask your request. That's why he starts off with the words Kael, which is God's name of kindness, Na, please, and then he says, Rafana love, you can heal her. Lamer, Ma Talmud Lamer, what does it mean, so to say? Who is he saying it to? Amar Loi, this is the way God said to God, this is what Moshe said to God. Hashiveni imatamirape isa imlav. Answer me, are you going to heal her or not? Until God answered, that we find the next few verses where it says that her father were to spit in her face, would she not be humiliated? This was what God answered to Moshe. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, in 4 places we find that Moshe asked God, will you respond or not? And he was waiting for a response. In our case where he asks, are you going to heal Miriam? God spoke to Moshe in front of God saying, Moshe spoke in front of God saying, this was in front of Pharaoh, where he says, how is Pharaoh going to listen? How are the Jews going to listen how is Pharaoh going to listen if the Jews themselves didn't listen? And in that case, what does it mean, so to speak? Tell me, are you going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt or not? That's when God responded, now you'll see the great miracles that will happen. On another case we find, which is in the book of Deuteronomy, God spoke to Moshe spoke to God, where Moshe asks of God that somebody should be appointed as a successor for the Jewish people. And that's when God responds him, take Yoshua, and he will be the one to be the successor. We find in another case as well, that Moshe says, I pray to God if I'm going to go into the land of Israel. And what does God respond? No, you're not going to go in, and stop asking. Please heal her. This seems like a very quick prayer. Why didn't Moshe say a longer prayer in asking of God? This was because he was worried that the Jewish people shouldn't say, his sister over here is suffering, and he's taking his time in praying. Another explanation is people shouldn't say because of his sister. He's extending his time in praying because that's his sister. But for us, he doesn't extend himself and pray for a long time. Verse 14. God responded to Moshe. If her father were to be upset with her and spit in her face, would she not be humiliated for 7 days? Therefore, in this case as well, she should be confined for 7 days, outside the camp. And afterwards she can be rejoined, and that's when they will continue to travel. Rashi, if her father were to be upset and spit in her face, what does this mean? Doesn't mean literally that he would spit in her face. If her father would show her that he's upset with her, would he not be humiliated by her? Would he not be upset or be embarrassed for Shivas Yamim for 7 days? It's more so for the divine presence, that at least technically should be 14 days. But it's worthy enough that the one that we're learning it from should be like to who we're judging it for. Being that I take it, if she were to embarrass her father, she would be embarrassed and she would be put aside for 7 days. So too, being that technically it should be for 14 days, but being that I'm comparing it to her father, so therefore it's only going to be for 7 days. Then she will rejoin, meaning afterwards she'll then be healed from her tzaras, and then she can join. Anytime we say joining or recalling, when it comes to a person with tzaras, the reason why you have to recall them is because they went outside the camp, and now when they're healed, they rejoin in the camp. Therefore it's called a sifa, gathering, that they come back and they join everybody else. Verse 15. Miriam therefore was confined to outside the camp. Shivas Yamim for 7 days, as God said. Miriam, and the people did not travel until Miriam returned and reunited with them in the camp. The Jewish people did not travel. This was respect that all the people gave her, that everybody waited for her. Because if you recall, Miriam was the one that stood on the side of the Nile River when Moshe was in a small basket waiting, when his mother put him in a basket in the Nile River until the princess of Egypt came to fetch her. Who was the one that was fetch him, and who was the one standing on the side watching him? Was Miriam. And because of that, the Jewish people waited for her as well 7 days. When she waited for Moshe while he was thrown into the Nile River, as it says in the book of Exodus, that his sister stood on the side to see what would happen for him, and because of that she was rewarded that everybody waited for her as well. As well as we see over here, Miriam was not punished that severely that she would have to have the 14 days, and that is because, technically speaking, it wasn't that she was speaking ill against Moshe. God felt that it was ill against Moshe because she was mingling into their private affairs. However, she meant for the good, and therefore she got not as a severe punishment. Afterwards, the Jewish people traveled from Chatzeros, and they settled and they camped in the Paran desert. This concludes the Torah reading of Beha'aloscha.